Welcome to the Military Justice Today podcast with your host, Robert Capovilla and Mickey Williams, covering the full range of military law topics from all branches of the armed forces. Today's episode is made possible in part by the law firm of Capovilla and Williams. And now, let's welcome the hosts of the show, Rob and Mickey.
All right, everybody, here we go. Another episode of Military Justice Today. Shot live outside Atlanta, Georgia at the podcast studio. Great to be with you. I'm Matt Starosiak. With me are two former Army Rangers and badass trial attorneys now, Dan Higgins and Mickey Williams. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, Matthew.
Hey, Matt.
Good. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. No Robert Capovilla today.
No RC, man. This is the second time.
That's rare. That's very rare.
It is.
Should we talk disparagingly about him?
I got nothing bad to say about Rob. I love Rob. There's a void. He's not here.
His energy.
But Matt did make a good point. He's like, well, you guys will get to talk more. Like,
That's true. Well, Robert, really, he does a great job on these podcasts, truth be told. The topics he covers and the way he covers them, I always enjoy it. But yeah, you guys are definitely going to get to talk more today. It's great to be with you. We're going to do kind of a lighter topic. We're going to talk about military movies, which is kind of cool. Interested to get your guys' opinions on what you think is real and not real and which ones you've enjoyed. So let's get right into that. And I don't know, where do we want to start? How about the most, now you guys both are combat veterans, so you've been around the block a little bit and you can attest to the realism of these shows. So let's start there. In terms of movies, military movies that are most realistic in your opinion. Mickey, you want to start?
Sure. I thought about this, but it was easy for me to come up with this one. This film I've talked about on this podcast before, and Terrence Malick directed it. It's The Thin Red Line. I love that film. Some people will be like, it's not like Saving Private Ryan or this or that. I was like, no, it's definitely not. But I think it's really realistic, especially when you get to the scene when John Cusack's calling for fire up on that bunker and the way those guys are sneaking up in Guadalcanal, and just kind of you see the stressors and the PTSD setting in on these men who are fighting this incredible battle to take this island. I mean, for me, the guy who wrote the book, James Jones, incredible book, incredible author, served in the military. He served in Guadalcanal. And so, or maybe he didn't serve in Guadalcanal because he wasn't a Marine, he was an Army guy. So wherever he served, doesn't matter. Anyway, he's a military guy, and you can see when he writes about the inner dialogues of the characters and what they're thinking about is so realistic to me that's what guys think about in those positions. So that's my favorite film and the most realistic film that I've seen. It's not a modern film. It was made in the 90s, and we don't even have the director's cut. I guess the director's cut was going to be like 10 hours long or something. And it got chopped down to like 2 hours, maybe 3 hours.
Yeah, it's Terrence Malick.
Yeah.
But what you say you like, the realism from your perspective, and maybe it's several things, but the most is the interaction between the guys, right?
Yeah, the psychology. I think they got the psychology of the soldier right in that film. I also think the battle scenes are amazing. Also, it's just one of those movies that just resonated with me, and I watch it at least once a year because it's just a favorite of mine.
All right, great analysis and great choice. I know I've seen that movie, but it's been a long time. Dan, what about you? You've got a different option, I would assume.
Yeah, so my family and friends kind of know me as a snob when it comes to reviewing military movies because I'm like that guy where I'm rolling my eyes and saying it out loud like, oh my God, that would never happen, or like, that doesn't look right, that doesn't sound right, that's cringe, right? But, one of the movies that comes to mind right off the bat is Black Hawk Down. And it's an enormously, popular movie based on Mark Bowden's book, Black Hawk Down, based on the real events that took place in Somalia in 1993. But you know what I think made that movie great is that, well, a couple of things. One, they had folks who were actually there, Rangers and Delta guys who were actually there on the ground, they were advisors on the film. So when they're right there on set, they're telling them, hey, you need to hold the weapon this way. You need to, take, cover, behind a building or a vehicle, this way. This is the way, you move in a room when you're going to, enter and clear a room. And then all the actors went through all the Rangers went down to Fort Benning, now Fort Moore, and they went through like a little basic training.
Yeah, with the actors?
Yeah, the actors did, right? They went through like a little basic training. And then all the guys, that played the Delta guys like Eric Bana and William Fichtner, these other guys, they went up to Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty, and they went through all the cool stuff. They're doing demo and they're, entering, clearing rooms, doing all sorts of cool stuff. And so they kind of separated everybody like that intentionally early on. But just, I think that a movie is never going to get it perfect, right? But Black Hawk Down, I think, captured that battle and the sacrifice and the loss on both sides very, very well.
Yeah.
And captured what it means to be a Ranger very well, right? Never leaving a man behind, right? Never giving up, completing the mission, right? I think that they did a great job capturing all of that. And it was great performances. Like you go back and look and like everybody that's involved in that movie, Josh Hartnett, Tom Hardy is in that. He's a real young guy there.
Yeah. Sizemore.
Tom Sizemore is the battalion commander of 375.
I like how he's always walking around like
totally calm.
He's just walking around totally calm. He doesn't have a weapon. He's not doing anything. He's just walking around.
I think that was
caring the world.
I think that's an accurate. Isn't that
yeah,
how that colonel really was?
Yeah, I met him in person actually at an event, and he was a very cool guy, very calm guy, very professional. And he kind of recounted the events and what happened there. He's very impressive.
Well, and knowing what we know about the late Tom Sizemore, he would actually be walking around like it was no big deal.
Yeah.
With bullets flying, right?
Yeah, no, he's a great actor. Yeah. Was a great actor. And then you have like Jeremy Piven as one of the 160th helicopter pilot. You got Eric Bana and William Fichtner.
He's one of my favorite actors.
Yeah.
Period.
What's his name? I can't think of his name. That was the CG in that. He's a really legendary actor, Texan. I can't remember his name off the top of my head right now. But
yeah, I know
just all around great cast.
No, that's a great movie. And when that movie came out, I saw it with my recruiter. This was I came out right after 9/11, and I was signed up for the Army, and I had a Ranger contract. And so my recruiter, I remember him, his Staff Sergeant Codis, he's like, "Hey, let's go to this movie." And so we went, and he took me to the movies, and that was a cool experience. And then I went to basic training, airborne school. Then I got into RIP, got through RIP, and then the movie came out on DVD. And do you remember DVDs used to have these things on them where you could watch like deleted scenes or behind the scenes and all those options, stuff that you don't get on streaming, but on DVDs you would. Well, I was watching all that stuff, and then I saw that my first sergeant was in there on the training with a lot of these actors.
That's cool.
And the RIP instructors who had just tortured me were on there. And some of my RIP instructors also were in Somalia, so they had particular knowledge that
pretty cool.
Yeah, that they could give to the actors and basically were consultants on it.
Sam Shepard was the actor I was trying to think of.
Yeah. Well, all right. So let me ask you one more question about that. And we could talk about these two movies that we've already mentioned for a whole show, I'm sure. But my favorite scene in that movie is when the guys request permission to be put down, and those are two snipers, right? Those are two snipers that
Medal of Honor recipients, Gary Gordon and Randall Shugart.
Yeah, and I just that's such a crazy scene, and the fact that it really happened. But what did you think about the realism of that scene from what happened and kind of how that whole thing transpired?
Yeah, what's interesting about that is there was a third sniper, right, that was actually really badly wounded. And I don't know if he was in that helicopter or if he was in another helicopter that was out there, hovering. And, because you basically had that first Black Hawk go down and all, forces trying to move on that Black Hawk to secure it, rescue the pilots and crew, right? Then you have a second Black Hawk go down, quite a ways away. And nobody can get there, right? Because you're dealing with, the Somalis throwing tires down in the middle of the road, burning them, putting all sorts of obstacles and roadblocks in the road. So it's making it very, very difficult for that ground convoy to move, right? And then so, nobody was there to help out that other helicopter. Now, the third sniper, his name's Brad Halling. And he survived. He lost his leg, I believe, below the knee. But just to talk to you about some of, the type of folks that are in the Ranger Regiment and in, Delta, and the type of folks that were there, Brad Howling, I don't know if it was an RPG that hit him or if it was a round that got him, but it took his leg off pretty much like below the shin, like at the ankle. They evac him back to the airport where they had their base. And, the surgeons are starting to go to work on him and everything and stabilize him. And he's basically requesting like, hey, I'm good. Just put a tourniquet on it. Let me get back out there. Right.
Oh, my gosh.
Like he's trying to get back in the fight, despite the fact that his leg is like gone.
Yeah.
Much. So that left Gary Gordon and Randall Shugart basically as two snipers that are watching, what's going down. Right. And they can see it. And then the movie captures, they can see it better than anybody else. They can see, forces coming in and surrounding the helicopter. Right. They know that if they don't go in there, they're going to watch, at least one of their guys. They don't know who's alive and who's dead at that point. Several of their guys get captured, get killed, get tortured.
Yeah.
Right? And so they made the knowing and willing decision that they know they may not make it out. There's a good chance.
Yeah, probably a good chance they're not going to, right?
Because they're going to get over what they can see that there's, a large crowd down there that's coming in on the helicopter. So they requested several times. The CG, denied them several times and then basically gave it to the Delta commander at the time to basically, hey, it's your call. And then, he says, okay, go ahead and put them in. They get in there and, obviously you see it in the movie, they hold it down. But they said that, they killed probably 30 or 40 people by themselves, right? Defending that helicopter and defending Mike Durant, who was the pilot that was still alive. Obviously, he got captured and then, he's eventually turned back over. But that's as heroic and brave and as selfless as it possibly gets, right? And obviously they were awarded the Medal of Honor.
Yeah, well deserved. Okay, well, so we went long on that, but a great discussion nonetheless. So how about most unrealistic, if we can? And we're going to exclude Stripes. And I think there was one back in the 70s with Goldie Hawn that was like Private Benjamin or something. But we're going to exclude kind of the ridiculous ones. But what is the most unrealistic that perhaps the best way to say it would be it was meant to be realistic, but it's not?
What do you think, Mickey?
Well, if you've never served, you probably love this movie. If you have,
watch it. Yeah, hey, watch it.
You probably
it's an Oscar winner.
Yeah, you've probably seen it 20 times
or Oscar nominee. I don't know
if you have served in a combat unit, you're screaming and say, "Turn this crap off! I can't watch it. It's so absurd." And listen, it's the Hurt Locker. Okay, I can't stand that movie. It is so ridiculous. Here you have a guy. He's like EOD or something, EOD, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I've been around EOD guys. All right, lots of them. I know what they do, what their mission is, and everything. I'll tell you one thing, and they got a dangerous job, right? They got to disarm bombs. Like that is a very stressful. You mess up, boom, you're dead. But I'll tell you what they're not doing is going outside the wire by themselves, infiltrating Iraq and trying to capture bad guys. Like that is not happening.
ACU pants and a hoodie.
Yes.
Running through Baghdad.
Yes. Or flying helicopters or whatever the heck this guy was doing. If you did that and try to come back on the green zone, you'd probably get shot or at least arrested and they would interrogate you.
You'd be court-martialed.
Yeah. I'd be like, what the hell are you doing? You a spy? Like, what is this?
Yeah.
You working for the other side? I mean, that movie, I was talking to Dan about it. I was like, I can't stand that film, but people love it. And it's an action film. It's got a main guy who's a hero in it and everything. That's cool. But if you served, you can't, it's like being a lawyer, watching a lawyer film and saying, that would never happen. That's absurd or whatever. But I mean, what do you think about it, Dan?
What's funny is that there was one scene that really bothered me, and there's so many scenes, right? The running outside the camp, by himself and everything, ridiculous, right? You would get captured and tortured and beheaded, right?
Mm-hmm. Maybe worse.
Yeah. There was one scene where there's some sort of ambush. I haven't seen it in forever. I think I only saw it once and turned it off, but. He picks up an M107 50 caliber sniper rifle, right? Now, EOD is trained on sniper rifles because they can use sniper rifles to engage an IED, right, as a way to disarm it, basically. So it was funny, when I was in Baghdad in 05, 06, there was Navy EOD in our camp, and I think Navy EOD is probably the best out of all the branches. They're really, really impressive. Very good at what they do. But they could not leave the camp unless they brought us with them. So they'd have to bring the scouts and snipers with them because it was so dangerous, right? And one of the things in Hurt Locker is he rolls out there like with one truck, right?
Yeah.
One truck or two trucks, max, and he just rolls out there into the middle of the desert to go, disarm a bomb. You would never roll out unless you had at least a 3-truck minimum. I think when I was there, it was even 4 trucks you had to roll out because the security situation was so bad, right? So that's what Navy EOD would do with us is they would roll out in their trucks, then they would bring us with them, the scouts and the snipers, and we would go out and provide security for them while they went out to disarm the, and then they would bring the snipers with them so that if they had to engage one of these IEDs with a sniper weapon system, they could do so, right? Because they're EOD guys, they're not snipers, right? So they weren't really trained on the system. So when I see Jeremy Renner pick up an M107 and then, the weapon is not zeroed to him, right? It's not zeroed to him, but he just immediately picks up a sight picture and starts engaging, dudes and just like accurate, precision fire. It's like, oh my God, dude, like this is so far-fetched.
Well, how many guys in EOD when they're like, they're out at the bar or whatever, and they're talking to a lady, how many of them say, yeah, I'm in EOD? She's like, oh, what's that? He goes, you seen the Hurt Locker? That's me. I would totally do that.
All right. So
I will say this. I will say this. There was one scene that I actually liked in that movie.
The credits? Oh.
It's actually right before the credits. Okay. It's the very end of the movie to where he's home, but he basically can't be happy because, there's that allure, that he knows the war is still going on and he can't be there and be involved and be helping. And so he's there, with his young child and his wife and, kind of ends with him walking back into combat. So I did like that. I did like,
So there was at least one realistic scene, in your opinion.
Yeah, or a moving scene, right?
Yeah.
That they actually may have gotten it right.
All right, Daniel, your most unrealistic movie.
I'm right there with him. Hurt Locker.
Oh, so that's yours as well.
And I have complaints about others, right? So, American Sniper, awful.
Whoa,
awful, absolutely awful.
Whoa.
And here's the thing: I love Bradley Cooper.
Yeah.
I love Bradley Cooper. I think he's a great actor. Yeah, I actually said, hey, back in the day when you saw him in Hangover, it was like 2009, and it was like a comedic role, obviously, but I was like, hey, you know what? I bet that dude right there, I bet he's going to be like a leading dramatic actor someday. Like, he's got good chops, good looking dude. Like, he's going to be successful. Sure enough, he's like one of the, most famous actors now.
Okay.
But the whole story I thought was just so poorly told, right? And there's all sorts of, holes with the Chris Kyle story and everything like that. His exploits and look, he's a Navy SEAL sniper at the end of the day, extremely tough dude, extremely good at what he did. He was respected by a lot of the people he served with. He was a warrior, right? And so, I see a lot of folks denigrate him because, he inflated some of the things that he did, right? He said that he had over 150 kills. And, Mickey and I have talked about this, right? I served as a sniper. I spent 12 months in combat. I didn't know anybody that was getting north of, 100 kills, not even close.
Well, you just said the guys who were in Somalia, which, my Lord, you want to talk about a mass of people coming at you, only 30, 40
and that's,
kills.
Those are crowds.
Yeah, that's what weapons. I'm saying.
Yeah, 30 to 40 kills there. And so, when we talk about, you stack 150 kills, when I went through sniper school, I stayed in contact with everybody I went to school with, right? And so even back in those days, I'd like instant message guys that were like in different, provinces. And, they would tell me, hey, they just racked up, 4 kills the other day, right? And that was like a big deal, right? For snipers. I didn't know anybody that came home with more than, 20 to 30 kills, right? Across the region, not just my unit, but other brigades. I knew the SEALs that were on our camp. I knew their snipers, right? Nobody was racking up the amount of kills. Now, he was in Ramadi in some really...
It was in Fallujah too?
I think so. He was in some of the bigger, more violent areas to where, you could get a lot of kills. But then you talk about confirmed kills. Anyways, the movie... Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about confirmed kills.
Confirmed by who, right? And so, so back in the day, I think a lot of this came around in Vietnam when snipers would get a kill and then your company commander or PL or something like that would come out and confirm the kill, right? They would bring a patrol out, and they would do that sometimes in Iraq as well, right? If you are in an OP and you're watching a road to where they're potentially going out and setting IEDs and you shoot some folks, typically QRF would come out, right? And, assess the scene, EOD would come clear the device, and maybe your company commander's out there, right?
Yeah.
So he says, hey, these are my guys' kills, right? But that's so rarely happens, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to risk bringing officers out there into the fight to say,
To look at it. Yeah.
Well, those are confirmed.
And here's the reality of it. There is so much stuff going on. There's so many bullets flying down range. I mean, everybody's shooting at something, right? Nobody really knows, unless you have the gun up against the guy's head and you blow his brains out, nobody really knows who killed whom. Like, it's just like one of those.
Yeah, I've always kind of thought about that. Like, how do you really know with bullets flying?
Well, when
down?
you're a sniper and you drop someone.
Yeah, well, that's different.
But
most people are engaging targets
simultaneously
300 meters out plus, and everybody's shooting.
Yeah.
I mean, I've shot at the range many times at 300 meters. It takes me 3 or 4 shots to hit the damn thing out there sometimes. So
you're trying to tell me that the guy in the helicopter in Full Metal Jacket, when he's shooting down at the people and he's talking about how many confirmed kills, he didn't really know.
Probably.
Remember that guy in the helicopter?
What Dan is saying, people say, oh, I got 17 confirmed kills. No, you don't, guy. You might have 17 kills, but they're not. It's a technical thing is all it is.
But it just the way that they portrayed Iraq at the time, the way they portrayed, being a sniper and everything was just absolutely unrealistic. I came away with it. I was upset. The only other real unrealistic movie I would say, Zero Dark 30. It's funny about Zero Dark 30.
Oh, really?
It's paradoxical because it's almost, as realistic as it gets in some aspects, and then it's horrible in other ways. So that is one of the only movies I have seen to where they got all the gear perfectly. So, I think it's a pretty known fact that Hollywood or the CIA basically worked with Hollywood to make that movie.
Yeah.
They advised them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They gave them a lot of help to make sure that was accurate.
So you're talking about the gear when they went to the house and killed Osama bin Laden. It's all right.
That's one of the only movies you're going to see. They're in proper MARPAT uniforms. They have the quad tube night vision goggles. Their weapons are realistic as to what SEAL Team 6 and Delta and some of these guys would use, right? But other things not realistic. They come into the compound, and you can see they all have their IR lasers on their weapons because their nods
are up,
and they're flagging everybody, right? You see like lasers going across the. First of all, operators at that level are never going to be flagging their buddy so flagrantly like that. Sometimes it happens when you're in a fight and you're moving quickly, but just you're scanning and you're coming into the compound scanning and you're flagging your dude right across his back. So there were some things that were good, some things that were bad about Zero Dark 30.
But you guys, all right, so here's a follow-up question. You guys can enjoy a movie, at least some, maybe The Hurt Locker is the exclusion. You can enjoy a movie that's unrealistic because Mickey Williams, I think you had said one of your favorite movies is Top Gun 2. And
I like that
And they
film,
find an F-14 and they jumpstart the thing.
That's absurd.
And they freaking fly it and they take down 2 MiGs or something. But
I don't consider
you enjoyed that movie.
Yeah, but I don't consider that a serious military film.
It's a fun movie.
That's an entertainment movie.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Marvel thing,
Yeah.
But for adults, here's what I would say. I can't even watch modern day military movies. I just generally don't watch them. I like the old films. You mentioned Full Metal Jacket and all that stuff. I like those.
Saving Private Ryan.
What about Saving Private Ryan? What's your guys' thoughts on that in terms of, and I know obviously that's a movie that goes back many years, long before any of us were born, so it might be hard to recognize the realism of it or not. But what do you think about that movie?
I mean, I think the opening scene is incredible. Like that whole storming the beach. That was awesome. And I mean, Steven Spielberg, right? He's a master of his craft. So yeah, I enjoyed the film when I was a kid, but I don't know if I could even watch it today. That part when Tom Hanks is shooting the tank and with a pistol blows up. I was like, oh, that's kind of corny, but whatever.
Well, yeah, the plane like comes overhead and pushes it or something like that. So it's not him. But
what about you when you watch Saving Private Ryan, Dan? What do you think?
I remember seeing it, when I was younger, being completely blown away. I mean, at how gritty it was. That first scene where they're storming the beaches in Normandy.
Cameras were shaking and all that shit.
That was as violent as I've ever seen, right? And, you know, with the guy, his intestines are coming out and he's screaming for his mom, right?
Yeah.
There were so many aspects of like small unit tactics and small unit relationships in that movie that I thought were captured so well, right? The way that Tom Hanks interacts with the guys, the way that Tom Sizemore interacts with the guys, some of the relationships, you know, I thought was awesome. I thought they did a really good job. But obviously that's fiction, right? That's fiction. It's not the same thing as something like Black Hawk Down, to where, you know, it's a real event.
Yeah.
So obviously Normandy really happened, but they're taking liberties.
What about? I actually like this, and you guys are gonna be like, "Dude, what are you thinking? That's so dumb." I really like G.I. Jane.
Oh, dude, there are aspects of G.I. Jane that are so ridiculous. I love
ridiculous.
That movie. When I was so ridiculous, but some parts are great.
When I was in junior high, I saw that film, and dude, I was like, I'm gonna be a freaking Navy SEAL, dude. It was like a great recruiting film. I was like, oh, I'm all about it.
Master Chief, man.
Oh, the Master Chief was so cool, like the whole thing, and they go to SEER school, all that. I was like, damn.
It was so. That's one of this should probably take the cake for being unrealistic, right? Because so the whole premise of that movie is that you're trying out for this elite unit, right? And so they have SEALs, Rangers, Delta, Green Berets. Apparently, everyone's trying out for this unit. They called it CRT. You know, I forget what it stood for, but they're saying it's a special unit, right?
Man, you remember a lot about this movie.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was
100%.
a special unit.
It was a special. But then what do? They go through buds, basically. They go through basic SEAL training. So it's like, why are these SEALs trying out for some special unit? They're going through exactly what they've already done, you know?
Yeah.
And so, you know, there were so many things that were unrealistic, you know, the whole SEER school thing. But
it was cool, though. Like when you're a kid and you're seeing it.
Yes.
Like,
well, and it's Vigo, right? It's Vigo.
Yeah.
His character, I think, kind of made the movie because his character, it was very flawed, and he went through personal struggle. And as much as corny as the movie is, and I'm sure unrealistic, there were some really good parts, I thought, with his character.
Vigo is, dude,
he was great.
Who was he in Lord of the Rings? He was like Aragorn, whatever. Yeah. Okay, dude, the guy's
No, that was
he knows what he's doing.
That was great, and there's some great lines in there. You know, him talking to Demi Moore about, you know, she's like, "What did you get a Silver Star for?" And he says, "Pulling a 230 pound man out of a burning tank. Could you do that? Right? You know, if he's burning alive in that tank, could you pull him out? Right?" And then there's another great quote.
Yeah, I guess that is the question.
Yeah. And then there's a great quote in there. It's, you know, never have I seen a wild thing feel sorry for itself. A bird will drop frozen dead from a bough. Never felt
Dude, you watched this film last night?
No.
What do you do?
He said he didn't like it. He's quoting it.
Yeah, no, but I can also recognize that some of it is incredibly silly.
All right, so we're gonna wrap this up because I think we're running long. I do have a question I got to ask you guys. You might not like this question, but when you see some of these combat movies, does it ever take you back to a dark place? Do you ever feel like, you know, and start remembering maybe some of the shit stuff that you guys saw when you're out in the field, or not really?
No.
You're far enough removed from it?
Yeah. So the only thing I have had moments where something like that has happened, but it's usually like a loud bang or something like that will take you. You suddenly get into that mode, whatever it is, just for like a brief second.
Yeah.
I've never had like a full on flashback. First of all, I wasn't in anything that would require a flashback, really. But you hear about the guys who fought in Vietnam running out into in fact, one of my buddies from high school, I grew up with this kid. We went to elementary all the way up through high school. His dad was a Vietnam vet, and he would tell us about how sometimes his dad would just have these freakouts and would lose control, basically have a psychotic breakdown and think he was back in the bush, and he'd run out in the woods and everything. I was like, oh my God, that's crazy.
All right, Dan, you ever anything?
No, not like that.
Not a movie, for sure.
I think that there are certain, you know, movies or scenes that can be evocative, you know, and emotional. I think that if I could recommend, you know, one military movie for someone to watch to truly understand the impact of service, it would probably be Taking Chance. And it's a movie that a lot of people haven't heard of. But
I haven't.
I haven't heard of this.
You should absolutely go watch it. It's Kevin Bacon. He plays a Marine lieutenant colonel. in the early days of the Iraq War. He never deployed to combat, and so he's got kind of this insecurity about it, that he didn't get to serve, because I think he's maybe like a public affairs guy or something like that. He's a job that doesn't require you to be in combat. And so he volunteers, and this is a true story. He volunteers for this mission to return a fallen Marine. And I believe he had some sort of connection. Maybe it was like, his hometown, or he was near that area. But it was Lance Corporal Chance Phelps was the Marine that was killed. And so he escorts the body back home. And so it kind of tells the story of him going through the airport, the whole process of, what happens when a service member is killed. How are they cleaned and taken care of? Their uniform, everything, delivered back home, and then, picked up by an escort, put into a vehicle, taken back home to the funeral, getting to know all of the friends and family and everybody back home. It's a
sounds gut-wrenching just hearing you describe it.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. And it's a true story. And it's Kevin Bacon does an incredible job. So
wow, I will watch that. I might watch it tonight, actually.
Yeah, it's good.
All right, guys. Well, I think we're almost out of time. We could talk about 50 movies, and maybe we will. And I've asked our listeners in a couple of the last episodes that we post these on our YouTube page. You can leave comments if you like this kind of content. Please let us know. We'll do more of it. Any closing thoughts, guys? You guys think you could direct a movie someday?
Oh,
so I think we need Mickey and I to be advisors part-time. We'll do it, go out to Hollywood and advise.
You guys would be great at that. Mickey would.
To make sure they don't
I would
screw
totally
stuff
take
up.
the trip.
He looks like a Hollywood producer right now.
Where's my cream cheese bagel? Get it over here, Dan. The only thing I would say, there's two movies I didn't mention that I really liked, and they're old, okay? But they're so good. The Caine Mutiny. The book is better than the film, but it's a really good one with a Navy court-martial in it. And then Paths of Glory with Kirk Douglas, and that is actually a Stanley Kubrick film from 1957. And there's also court-martial in that. But anyway, I really like those old films with the military, because those were made closer in time to the events. So you get. And plus, you didn't have like all the political stuff in there. Just like, here's the story.
Yeah, right.
Here you go. And it was
the other honorable mentions I would say we didn't get to talk about is Apocalypse Now and Platoon. Apocalypse Now really isn't about Vietnam. It's more about, the human condition, but it captures the insanity of Vietnam really, really well. And then Platoon, I think, is probably one of the best movies about Vietnam ever. It's loosely based off of Oliver Stone's own experience in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And that's a legendary movie.
Is that the one with Charlie Sheen?
Yep.
And Tom
Berenger, Willem Dafoe.
I mean, that's a great cast. It'd be hard
Willem
to do.
Dafoe, dude. That guy.
It'd be hard to do bad with that cast.
Elias. Yeah, no, it's those are some good ones we can talk about later.
Well, guys, really appreciate it. Great episodes. I know our listeners are going to love it. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. Another episode of Military Justice Today in the books. Until next time, take care. Be safe.
Thanks for listening to the Military Justice Today podcast with your hosts, Robert Capovilla and Mickey Williams. This show was made possible in part by the law firm of Capovilla and Williams. For more information or to listen to more episodes, visit militaryjusticetoday.com.